The hall was silent, except for the cold, mechanical voice calling names one after another and stamping them on the giant glowing screen. Young men and women sat in rows, their hearts racing, their futures hanging on a single word: chosen or rejected. The Earth Defense Draft was supposed to be the highest honor for any human. To be chosen meant glory, power, a place in history. To be rejected meant shame, weakness, and a life in the shadows. Eli Ward sat in the last row, his hands pressed together so tight his knuckles turned white. His heart beat fast as he listened. To the sound of the machine stamping chosen again and again, he could almost feel the eyes of the crowd behind him. Everyone already whispered that Eli was too weak, too thin, too worthless to fight for Earth. But still, deep inside, he hoped the machine would see something in him that no one else did. The names went on, one louder, each one heavier. Families cried in joy when their children were chosen. Soldiers in uniform clapped with pride. When someone was rejected, a cold silence followed. The unlucky one walked out with lowered head, like a ghost who no longer belonged in the world. Eli's throat was dry, his palms sweaty. He remembered the words of his own father earlier. That morning, sharp and cutting like a blade, "Don't expect much, Eli. You're not like the others. You'll never be a soldier." Eli had forced a smile then, but inside his heart had broken just a little more. Now, as the machine reached the end of the alphabet, his name echoed through the hall. Eli Ward. He stood up slowly, legs trembling, as if every step to the front was dragging chains around his ankles. Officer by the machine didn't even look at him for more than a second. The scanner flashed red across Eli's face, then moved down his body. The crowd leaned forward, waiting, whispering, ready to laugh. The mechanical voice was merciless. Status: rejected. Reason: unfit for service. The word appeared on the giant screen above him in glowing red letters: rejected. The sound of the stamp was like a hammer hitting his chest. The hall burst into murmurs and a few chuckles. Someone laughed openly. Eli felt his ears burn with shame. He wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but his feet stayed frozen on the floor. The officer waved him away with a dismissive hand. Next, Eli walked back down the long aisle as though it stretched for miles. He kept his head down, but he could still feel the eyes of everyone stabbing into him. His mother covered her face, unable to look. His father shook his head slowly, disappointed but unsurprised. A boy behind him whispered loud enough for Eli to hear, "Told you he'd fail." Eli clenched his fists but said nothing. He left the hall, the sound of cheers for the next chosen candidate echoing behind him. Outside, the night was cold, the street lamps casting long shadows. Eli sat on a bench, staring at his trembling hands. He had dreamed of this day for years, dreamed of proving himself. And now, with one word, the machine had taken everything from him. Worthless. That was what the world saw. But as Eli sat there, lost in his failure, he noticed something strange. Across the empty square, an old man in a dark coat stood watching. His posture was straight, his gaze sharp. There was no pity in his eyes, no laughter, no scorn. Only study, as if he were measuring Eli in ways no machine could. Eli looked away quickly, but when he looked back, the man was still there, still watching. A chill ran down Eli's spine. The man turned slowly and walked toward the dark alleys beyond the square. For a moment, Eli thought he saw something metallic glint under the coat, something that looked almost like a military emblem, but older, darker. Eli tried to ignore it. He told himself it was nothing. He stood up and began walking home, his heart heavy, his future broken. But after a few steps, he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, steady, deliberate. Eli turned. The old man was there again, closer this time, his face half hidden by the shadow of his coat. His voice was calm but carried power, the kind of power that silences a room. "You don't belong in their army," the man said. Eli froze, unable to answer. The man stepped closer, his eyes burning with a strange light. "You don't belong in their world of machines and numbers. You belong in mine." Eli swallowed hard. His voice came out weak. Who are you? The old man gave a small, cold smile. Someone who sees what others are blind to. I call you worthless. I call you necessary. Follow me, and I will show you the truth. For a moment, Eli thought about running. Everything in his mind screamed that this was dangerous, that this man was no ordinary recruiter. But something deeper, something hidden in Eli's chest, stirred for the first time. A spark of defiance. A whisper that maybe he was meant for more. Slowly, almost against his own will, Eli took a step forward. The old man nodded once, sharply, and turned into the shadows. Eli followed. Behind them, the draft hall continued its ceremony, cheering for the chosen. Discarding the rejected, never knowing that one of those cast aside had just taken his first step into a different kind of destiny. Destiny that would not only change him, but would make the galaxy itself learn to fear his name. Eli followed the old man through the narrow streets, his footsteps echoing against the walls as if the city itself was listening. The lamps grew fewer, the shadows deeper, and soon the noise of the draft hall faded into silence. The man walked with purpose, never looking back, but Eli could feel the pull, like an invisible rope, dragging him forward. He knew he should be at home, hiding from the shame of rejection. But something inside him whispered that his life had just shifted onto a path he could not turn away from. The man stopped at a rusted iron gate at the far end of the city, hidden behind overgrown vines and half-collapsed stone. He placed his hand on a scanner so old and broken it shouldn't have worked. Yet with a groan, the ground shook and the gate unlocked, revealing a dark passage leading down into the earth. Without a word, the old man stepped inside, and Eli hesitated. Only a moment before following. The tunnel smelled of oil and iron. Strange lights flickered along the walls, guiding their descent. Eli's nerves grew sharper with every step. His breath echoed, his mind filled with questions. Who was this man? Why bring him here? Was this a trap? A cruel trick to mock him further? But then the tunnel widened, and Eli stopped dead in his tracks. His mouth fell open. Before him stretched an enormous cavern, lit with blue light that shimmered like starlight. And in that cavern stood ships, hundreds of them sleek, black, and deadly, their hulls covered in markings he had never seen before. The air vibrated with a low hum, the sound of engines sleeping but alive. Men and women moved among the ships. But they were not like the polished soldiers of the Earth's defense force. These people looked rough, scarred, fierce. Some had mechanical limbs, others bore strange tattoos, others still carried the cold eyes of survivors. They worked with silent discipline, each step purposeful. Eli felt as though he had stepped into another world, one hidden beneath the surface of everything he thought he knew. The old man finally turned to face him. "Welcome to the Black Wing Fleet," he said quietly, but the words seemed to echo. Across the cavern, Eli blinked, struggling to understand. "But I thought the draft was the only way into Earth's defense." "I thought," the man cut him off. "The draft is a game. It takes the strong bodies, the loud voices, the ones who shine in the open. But the real war is not won by the obvious. It is won by those who were cast aside, those who learn to fight with nothing but will and cunning. We are the shadows." We. are the reason alien raiders whisper before they strike? The government denies we exist, and yet across the stars, our name is feared. Eli's chest tightened as he looked again at the fleet, black ships like predators waiting to be unleashed. Why me? He asked softly. The man's sharp eyes never left him. Because you are not broken, Eli Ward. You are overlooked. And overlooked men are dangerous if they survive. His voice grew darker, but survival here is not given. It must be earned. He gestured, and 2 soldiers stepped forward. One was a tall woman with a scar running down her face, her eyes hard and unyielding. The other was a stocky man with a mechanical arm that hummed faintly with power. They looked Eli up and down like hunters sizing up prey. The woman smirked. Another reject? She said. The man grinned cruelly. He won't last a week. Eli's fists clenched, his shame boiling into anger. But before he could speak, the old man raised his hand. You will begin training tomorrow. If you fail, you will leave, and you will never return. But if you endure, you will rise. His tone was calm, but his eyes burned with promise. Eli nodded slowly, though fear coiled in his stomach. Something told him this training would be nothing like what the chosen recruits faced above ground that night. Eli was given a narrow bunk in a dim room shared with other rejects young men and women from across Earth, each carrying their own scars of failure. Some had been too sickly, others too poor, others simply not noticed. They stared at him with hollow eyes, as though daring him to hope when they themselves had none left. Eli lay awake, staring at the metal ceiling, listening to the hum of the fleet above. He wondered if he had made a mistake, if he should have turned back at the gate. But even as doubt gnawed at him, another thought pushed forward. Maybe, just maybe, this was where he truly belonged. Morning came like a hammer, sirens blared, boots thundered, and Eli was dragged into a training yard deep inside the cavern. The air was thick with heat, the floor stained with sweat and blood. Soldiers shouted, weapons cracked, and machines roared. Eli was thrown into drills that pushed him to the edge of collapse. His arms burned, his lungs screamed, his body begged him to stop. But he did not stop. Every time he fell, the scarred woman barked at him to get up. Every time he failed, the man with the mechanical arm laughed at him. Rage kept Eli moving when his strength had gone. He remembered the words stamped across his life, rejected on. He swore he would make it a lie. Days blurred into weeks, and Eli changed. His body grew stronger, but more importantly, his mind sharpened. He learned to think differently, to fight with tricks and traps, to strike where no one expected. In one brutal simulation, he outsmarted an officer twice his size by leading him into a trap of collapsing scaffolds. When the officer crashed to the ground, gasping in defeat, the entire yard went silent. For the first time, Eli saw the soldiers look at him, not with mockery, but with something new, respect. The scarred woman stepped forward, her lips twitching into the faintest smile. Maybe he will last, she said. The old man, watching from the shadows, allowed himself a single nod. Eli stood there, chest heaving, bruised and bloody but unbroken. And for the first time since the draft, he felt the weight of a new truth pressing on him. He was not worthless. Not here. Here, he was becoming something else. Something the world above would soon learn to fear. The alarms came without warning, piercing through the cavern like knives. Red lights flashed across the walls, and the calm hum of the hidden base turned into chaos. Soldiers sprinted past Eli, strapping on armor, grabbing weapons, shouting orders. For a moment he froze, unsure if this was another brutal drill meant to break him, but the look in their eyes told him otherwise. This was real. The scarred woman grabbed him by the arm and shoved a rifle into his chest. On your feet, rookie? Today you either live as one of us, or die like the reject they said you were. Eli swallowed hard and nodded, his pulse racing. The old man's voice boomed across the cavern, steady and cold. Earth's fleets are under attack. Aliens believe they can raid our skies unchallenged. They are wrong. Blackwing launches. Now, the cavern shook as the hidden fleet came alive. The black ships lit up with blue fire, engines roaring like beasts ready for blood. Eli stumbled onto a dropship, his hands trembling as he strapped in beside the scarred woman and the man with the mechanical arm. Neither looked at him. Their eyes were locked forward, their faces hard, as though war was just another breath. Eli tried to steady his breathing, gripping the rifle so tight his fingers ached. Through the small viewport he saw the cavern ceiling crack open. For the first time the hidden fleet rose into the night sky, slipping into the dark like shadows no one knew existed. The stars stretched out before them, but soon they were filled with fire. Alien raiders swarmed Earth's orbit, their ships sleek and sharp, flashing with green light. Official Earth fleets were scattered, firing wildly, already breaking under. The attack? Eli's chest tightened. He had seen battles on the news. But nothing prepared him for the sight of real war, the silence of space broken only by the thunder of weapons and the dying flash of ships exploding. The Black Wing Fleet moved differently than any army Eli had ever imagined. They didn't form neat lines. They didn't march like machines. They darted, circled, struck like wolves on a hunt. Every move was a trap, every strike unexpected. The dropship shook violently as it entered the battle. The scarred woman barked, "Stay low, follow orders, and don't die." Wait. Before Eli could answer, the hatch blew open and the vacuum of space pulled at him. They were inside the Raider flagship. The fight was immediate. Energy bolts flew past his head, sizzling against the walls. Soldiers roared as they charged forward, blades and rifles flashing. Eli dove for cover, heart hammering, his hands shaking as he fired his rifle for the first time. The bolt tore through an alien chest and the creature collapsed, its armor sparking. Eli froze, staring at the body, the reality of what he had just done crashing into him. The man with the mechanical arm yanked him up roughly. No time to think, rookie, kill or be killed. Eli forced his legs to move, forced his hands to aim, forced his mind to push the fear down. He remembered the endless drills, the humiliations, the screams of his trainers telling him he would never last. And now here in the fire of real battle, he realized he was not breaking. He was adapting. He was surviving. The Black Wing soldiers fought like shadows, slipping behind enemy lines, striking where no one expected. Eli found himself separated from the others, cornered by two raiders twice his size. His rifle clicked empty. Panic clawed at him, but then he remembered the training yard, the scaffolds, the traps. His eyes darted to the overhead pipes, sparking with heat. He raised his empty rifle and fired blindly at the ceiling. The shot burst the pipe, spraying boiling steam down onto the aliens. They screamed, blinded and burned, and Eli dove forward, grabbing a fallen blade and finishing them both. When he looked up, the scarred woman stood at the far end of the hall, her rifle lowered, when for a moment her cold eyes softened, just enough to show a flicker of approval. Then she turned and moved on without a word. Eli's chest swelled with something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Hours later, the battle was over. The Black Wing Fleet had cut through the raiders with terrifying precision. Where the official Earth forces had failed, the hidden fleet had struck like a storm, leaving only wreckage behind. The government would deny it, would claim victory as their own, but the soldiers in space knew the truth. And among them, whispers began to spread. The rookie reject, the boy called worthless, had killed and survived. He had saved lives with tricks no one else would have dared to try. His name began to move quietly through the fleet, carried in low voices with a mix of surprise and respect. Back in the cavern, Eli sat alone on his bunk, his body aching, his hands still stained from the fight. He stared at them in silence, remembering the heat of battle, the flash of green fire, the sound of alien screams. He should have felt broken. Instead, he felt alive. For the first time in his life, he wasn't a reject. He wasn't worthless. He was a soldier of the Black Wing Fleet, and deep inside he knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the shadows of the base, the old man watched him quietly and whispered to himself, "The galaxy has no idea what's coming." The news spread faster than fire and dry grass, across Earth's networks and whispered across alien channels. The same message echoed. A nameless black fleet had appeared out of nowhere, crushed a raider armada, and vanished back into the dark. Officials denied it, of course. Generals stood on screens with proud faces and claimed victory for their official fleets. But soldiers who fought that night knew the truth, and their words carried. Aliens began calling them the Black Wings, predators of the void. For the first time, fear of humans spread beyond borders and governments, and Eli Ward's name began to slip into those whispers, though always with doubt. Could it really be the boy who had been rejected? Eli felt the change in the cavern base. Eyes that once mocked him now lingered with respect. The scarred woman no longer smirked at him with cruel amusement, but studied him with a sharp, professional gaze. The man with the mechanical arms still grinned, but his grin was edged with something new acknowledgement. Even so, not everyone welcomed Eli's rise. Among the shadows of the fleet, envy festered. Some hated that a rookie, a reject, had done what seasoned fighters failed to do. Some whispered that Eli was lucky, that he had cheated death, that he didn't deserve the respect he was gaining. Eli felt the tension growing like a storm on the horizon. One evening, as the fleet rested between missions, Eli walked through the training yard alone. The lights above flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the steel floor. He had just finished drills, his body aching, when a voice cut through the silence. "You think you're something special, don't you?" Eli turned to see a tall man step from the shadows, his uniform marked with the insignia of a senior officer. The man's eyes glared with open hatred. "You're just a reject who got lucky. And now the others look at you as if you belong here. I won't allow it." Before Eli could respond, the officer lunged, striking him hard across the jaw. Eli staggered, tasting blood. He raised his fists, ready to defend himself, but the officer's strength was overwhelming. The fight was brutal, quick, and merciless. Eli was thrown to the ground, his breath knocked out of him, his ribs aching. The officer leaned close, his voice a venomous whisper. "Never rise above your place. If you try, I'll end you myself." Then, without waiting for an answer, he disappeared into the shadows. Eli lay on the floor for a long time, staring at the flickering lights above, anger burning inside him, hotter than the pain. For the first time since joining the Black Wings, he felt the sharp truth. Not everyone was his ally. Not everyone wanted him to succeed. Some would gladly see him destroyed. He clenched his fists, swearing to himself that no one would break him again. Days later, another mission came. This time, it wasn't just a raid. It was an operation deep in alien territory, meant to capture intelligence. The Black Wing fleet moved like ghosts, slipping into enemy lines unseen. Eli led a small squad, his first true command. The scarred woman had tested him. The mechanical man had mocked him, but now both followed his orders, silent but watchful. The mission was going well until everything went wrong. An ambush. Alarms blared, enemy soldiers flooded the corridors. Eli's squad fought hard, but the numbers were overwhelming. Just when Eli began to fear they would be crushed, he saw something that froze him, the same officer who had attacked him in the training yard, standing among the aliens, feeding them information, guiding their attacks. The betrayal hit harder than any blow. Rage lit Eli's chest like fire. He shouted for his squad to hold the line, then charged toward the traitor with a fury he had never felt before. Their fight was savage. Two soldiers locked in hatred, blades clashing, fists pounding. The officer sneered between strikes. "You don't belong here, Ward. You'll die here, and no one will even remember your name." But Eli fought with the strength of every humiliation, every rejection, every scar. With a final roar, he drove his blade through the traitor's chest. The man gasped, eyes wide with shock, then fell lifeless to the floor. Silence filled the corridor. Eli stood. Over the body, chest heaving, his squad watching him with wide eyes. Slowly, he raised his voice, letting it echo through the halls. "Fear is our weapon. Remember it." His words rang like iron, and something shifted in the soldiers around him. They no longer saw him as a rookie, no longer as the boy who had been rejected. They saw a commander, one forged in fire and betrayal. When they returned to the cavern, the old man called Eli before the entire fleet. The traitor's body was dragged into the open, his crimes spoken aloud for all to hear. Then, With cold precision, the old man declared, "This is what happens to those who betray the Black Wings." He turned to Eli, and this is what happens when a man rises above the ashes of rejection. The fleet erupted in a roar of approval, the sound shaking the cavern walls. Eli stood tall, blood still staining his uniform, his heart pounding. With the weight of what had just begun, from that day his name was no longer whispered with doubt. It was spoken with fear, with respect, with warning. Eli Ward was no longer the reject. He was becoming the mark of fear, the shadow that enemies whispered about before sleep, the commander who turned rejection into a weapon sharper than any blade. The galaxy trembled. Word of the Black Wing fleet had spread like a shadow across the stars, and it carried with it a name that made enemies uneasy. Leading merchants whispered it in hushed tones. Soldiers spat it like a curse. Commanders studied it with dread. Across the Council of Empires, leaders of once proud alien races gathered and agreed on one thing: the Black Wing fleet had to be destroyed before it grew unstoppable. They had fought Earth's official armies before and crushed them, but this was different. This was not an army bound by rules, pride, or protocol. This was a force of ghosts, rejects, and predators led by a commander who had risen from nothing. And so, a coalition was formed. Dozens of alien fleets united, their purpose singular: to hunt down and erase the Black Wings forever. Deep in the cavern, Eli stood before a glowing projection of the coalition's armada. It was vast, a sea of ships blotting out stars, more firepower than Earth could ever hope to face openly. The scarred woman crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "They outnumber us 10-1. Even with the Black Wings, this is suicide." The man with the mechanical arm grunted in agreement. "Maybe we can fight, but not win. Not against that." All eyes turned to Eli, waiting, testing. He stared at the endless swarm of ships, his face unreadable, then spoke with calm certainty. "We will not fight them head-on. We will turn their strength into weakness. We will make their numbers our weapon." The old man leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What do you have in mind, Ward?" Eli's gaze shifted to the holographic map of Earth's orbit. Scattered among the stars were thousands of dead satellites, broken stations, debris from centuries of human spaceflight. To most, it was nothing but junk. To Eli, it was opportunity. "They see orbit as our weakness, a graveyard of trash. I see a minefield. We will turn the sky itself against them." His voice grew harder. "They believe humans are weak. We will teach them fear." Preparations began at once. The Black Wings worked tirelessly, dragging satellites, broken metal, and derelict ships into position. They wired them with explosives, connected them with hidden tethers, armed them with stolen alien tech. The scarred woman oversaw the traps with cold precision, while the mechanical man laughed as he tested the explosive charges, muttering, "Let's see how they like our garbage." Eli watched everything closely, refining every detail. He knew this battle would not just decide survival, it would decide whether the galaxy would ever dare strike Earth again. When the day came, the stars burned with war. The coalition's fleets arrived in a storm, their ships shining with alien pride, banners of empires fluttering across the void. They expected a desperate defense, a doomed human fleet clinging to survival. Instead, the Black Wings were waiting in silence, hidden in the darkness. The alien commanders gave the order to advance, and the first wave surged forward. That was when the sky itself turned against them. Derelict satellites suddenly came alive, detonating in chains of fire that tore through the enemy's front lines. Steel cables whipped out of the darkness, slicing ships apart. Explosives hidden in debris fields erupted, shredding proud warships into fragments. Panic rippled through the coalition ranks as the void they thought empty became a graveyard of traps. In the chaos, the Black Wing fleet struck. Their black ships burst from the shadows like predators, weaving through the wreckage, firing with ruthless accuracy. Every move was calculated, every strike designed to break the enemy's spirit. Eli led from the front, his ship darting between burning wrecks, turning the battlefield itself into his weapon. His voice echoed through the coms, cold and steady. No mercy, no retreat. Make them remember why they fear the dark. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was clear long before it ended. Alien fleets broke under the relentless traps and strikes, commanders screaming in confusion as their numbers became their downfall. Ships collided in panic, retreating into the very traps they had ignored. The Coalition's flagship, a monstrous vessel meant to symbolize unity and strength, became a target for Eli himself. His ship dove through fire and wreckage, weaving past defenders, until he stood before the giant vessel. With calm precision, he gave the order. The Black Wings unleashed everything: torpedoes, cannons, explosives, ripped from broken satellites. The flagship burned in a storm of fire, breaking apart as the galaxy watched in horror. When the last alien ship fled, limping into the void, the battlefield was a wasteland of wreckage and silence. The Black Wings stood victorious, their losses heavy, but their spirit unbroken. On alien worlds, broadcasts spread like wildfire. The Coalition had failed. Earth's hidden fleet had destroyed an armada meant to crush them. And at the center of it all was Eli Ward, the boy once stamped as worthless, now commanding the most feared force in human history. Back in the cavern, the fleet roared in triumph. Soldiers who once doubted him now shouted his name. The scarred woman clasped his shoulder with firm respect. The man with the mechanical arm laughed and shook his head. "You're insane, Ward. But maybe that's why we follow you." Eli said nothing. He stood at the edge of the platform, staring at the holographic wreckage of the battle. His voice was quiet but carried across the hall. "They came to destroy us. Instead, we destroyed their faith. Let the galaxy whisper. Let them fear. Because this is only the beginning." And somewhere far beyond, in the alien council chambers, leaders argued in panic. For the first time in centuries, their empires had been humbled. For the first time, they admitted a truth they could not ignore. The humans, led by a rejected boy, had become the nightmare of the stars. The cavern was silent, not with fear, not with doubt, but with the heavy weight of victory. The Blackwing fleet had returned from the greatest battle in Earth's history. And though the scars of war still burned on their ships and their bodies, their eyes burned brighter than ever. The soldiers moved with pride, with confidence, whispering Eli Ward's name not as a question anymore, but as a fact. He was their commander, was the shadow that led them into the fire and brought them back out again. And beyond the cavern walls, the galaxy trembled with the knowledge that Earth had birthed something it could not control. Eli stood alone on the command platform, staring at the glowing map of the stars. Around him, leaders of Earth's official fleets spoke in hushed voices. Only days ago, they had dismissed him as worthless, denied that the Blackwing fleet even existed. Now they stood with pale faces, begging for his protection, pleading for his fleet to stand as Earth's shield. The highest generals saluted him reluctantly, their pride cracked. One of them, an old man with ribbons across his chest, stepped forward and said, "Commander Ward, Earth owes you everything. Without you, we would have fallen. The Blackwings must now come under official command under Earth's flag." The room grew tense. Soldiers of the Blackwings stood in the shadows, their hands on weapons, their eyes cold. Eli's face was unreadable as he listened. For a long moment, silence pressed down like a storm. Then Eli spoke, his voice calm but carrying the weight of steel. "You rejected us. You called us worthless. You threw us aside. And now, because we fought when you would not, you wish to command us? No." The word rang like thunder. The generals stiffened, anger flashing in their eyes, but none dared interrupt. Eli continued, his voice sharper with each word.
The Blackwing fleet does not belong to you.
It does not belong to Earth's councils or your broken systems. It belongs to the ones who were cast away and who rose in the shadows. We are Earth's shield, yes, but we are our own. The scarred woman stepped forward, standing at his side, her voice like iron. "If you want control, you will have to break us. And we do not break." The mechanical man laughed darkly, flexing his glowing arm. "Let's see if their shiny metals can save them from that." The generals fell silent, their faces pale. They understood. The Blackwings were no longer a secret force to to be hidden. They were a power that could not be chained. Later, Eli walked through the cavern, past rows of ships being repaired, past soldiers training with renewed fire. Everywhere he went, heads turned, voices whispered, eyes followed. Not with mockery, not with doubt, but with respect that ran deeper than fear. He remembered the draft hall, the red word rejected stamped above his head, the laughter, the shame. And now, here he stood, the commander of Earth's most feared fleet. A man whose name carried across the stars like a storm, a young recruit. Barely more than a boy stopped him in the corridor. His uniform was too big, his hands shook as he saluted. "Sir," he stammered, "they said I was too weak for the draft. They laughed at me." His eyes burned with the same fire Eli once carried. "But then I heard about you." For a moment, Eli saw himself reflected in the boy's eyes, saw the pain, the doubt, the desperate hope. He placed a hand on the recruit's shoulder. "They were wrong about you, just as they were wrong about me. Here you will rise. Here we make the rejected feared." That night, the fleet assembled. Thousands of soldiers filled the cavern, their voices rising like thunder as Eli stepped forward. The old man, the one who had first brought him here, stood in the shadows, watching with a faint smile. Eli raised his hand and the voices fell. Silent, his words cut through the air like a blade. He said we were worthless. They cast us aside, wanted us forgotten. But look at us now. We are the shield of Earth, the sword of the dark, the fleet the galaxy fears. We are the Black Wings, and we bow to no one. The cavern erupted with a roar, so loud the walls shook. The soldiers shouted his name, their fists raised, their eyes burning with fire. Ships rumbled as engines came alive, black wings unfolding. Like predators stretching after a long sleep, Eli looked up at them, his chest heavy with pride, with memory, with destiny. And as the fleet rose once more into the night sky, countless black ships breaking free of the earth and scattering into the stars, Eli's voice echoed across the combs, cold and unshakable. "They said I was worthless for the draft, but now I lead the fleet that will make Earth untouchable." The galaxy listened. The galaxy feared. And for the first time in history, the galaxy knew the truth. Earth's greatest weapon was not the chosen. It's not the perfect, not the strong. It was the rejected. And under Eli Ward, the rejected had become unstoppable.